I know I'm definitely too late to be talking about this topic, but I might as well. I'm a major fan of the Wheel of Time book series. I first read it when I was in college, and I've actually had dinner with Robert Jordan. I've met my husband through Wheel of Time fandom. I ran a Wheel of Time fan site for a long time. I still have it, and I've put the link down in the video notes. So speaking as a longtime fan of the book series, I was extremely disappointed in the show. Now, I know that there are some people that are absolutely fans of the show and they love what they did. I have to admit, I have trouble understanding that. And I know there have been a million different reasons all over the internet about why fans of the books had problems with the show. And I'm not going to repeat a lot of the common arguments. I mean, if you've paid attention to this topic, you've probably heard they had problems like it wasn't following the plot and so forth. And while all of that is true, I think there's really just a much simpler reason. Well, there's a few simpler reasons for why the show just didn't land right. Now, quality aside and accuracy aside, I feel like the show, especially in the first season, did not make the main characters likable in the slightest. So, in the books, I'm rooting for Rand, I'm rooting for Mat, I'm rooting for Perrin, I'm rooting for Moiraine, and I'm rooting for Egwene, rooting for Nynaeve. Like, all of these characters, Tom Merrilin as well, like, I could go on and on. The characters in the books are compelling. They make you want to see what's going to happen with them. I wasn't actually even addicted in the first book, but I liked it enough so that I picked up the second book, and that's when I got addicted. I feel like the TV show in the first season, it's like they forgot the number one rule of storytelling, which is make the main characters likable, make them compelling. Instead, they kind of portray Rand as a very bland, kind of stalker guy going after Egwene for no reason. Perrin, of course, a lot of people have talked about him fridging his wife, but it was even more than that and worse than that, in my opinion. One of the things was that his wife was, working at the forge while he was out drinking with his buddies, and that's the first impression that we get of this character. Obviously, that's not even close to the character that he is in the books. I'm not going to give a blow-by-blow account of everything that went wrong in the first season of the show. I think that's honestly just too much to list. I could go on for an hour and just tear it apart. And there have been other videos on YouTube that have already done that. But for me, at least, this wasn't even a matter of it being inaccurate to the books, although it was. I've enjoyed other adaptations that were somewhat inaccurate. I could say I'm actually enjoying Apple TV's version of the Foundation series, which is extremely inaccurate, doesn't follow the books at all. But they kind of put some effort into it. They made the characters compelling, and it's enjoyable to watch. It's beautiful to watch. And even though I have trouble calling that an adaptation, at least it is not an embarrassment to the source material. In contrast, The Wheel of Time Season 1, it felt like an insult. It actually felt like a parody, a kind of sick and dark parody of the books I loved. And I do have trouble understanding why people who say they're fans of the books were okay with the kind of fundamental changes to the likability of the main characters. The best and most generous interpretation to that, I think, is that people were just hoping for an adaptation of any sort, whether it be a stage play or a theater production or some low-budget thing. They just didn't care. They just wanted to see it adapted in some way, shape, or form. And so they did get that. But for me personally, I'm more of a book reader than a show watcher. I don't watch a lot of TV and a lot of movies. And to me, a bad adaptation is worse than no adaptation in many ways. I think it actually turns off more potential fans than brings in. I saw that a little bit years ago with the adaptation of the book series for Jumper. They made a movie that was, not so great. At the time, I had recently enjoyed the book series, and I was just kind of floored that that was the effort they put into the adaptation. And sure enough, it didn't really get a huge fan following behind it. We could also look at the 1970s animated film versions of The Lord of the Rings, the original adaptation before Peter Jackson did his big effort. Those did kind of revitalize the fandom a little bit and brought it more into the public consciousness. It wasn't until Peter Jackson's adaptation that I think we saw the massive fandom that Lord of the Rings has become. I really do hope that Wheel of Time gets a Peter Jackson kind of treatment in the future. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. There have been many, many remakes and rehashes, especially these days. Hollywood studios are afraid to take risks on new IP, so maybe some enterprising person will get a hold of this IP and give it another go. I sure hope so, and I hope that they do a much, much better job. one more thing that I would say about this adaptation was that I do feel like the quality was lacking quite a lot. If you look at kind of the sets and the costumes as compared to Game of Thrones. Now people say, oh, this one had budget problems, it had COVID problems, and so forth. And while that is true, I don't think that that explains the vast lack in quality. Like, to me, some of the sets in this Wheel of Time season 1, it looked like spray-painted styrofoam for the Waygate. The wolves were very obviously just dogs, wagging their tails. Let's not get started on their version of the Ogier Loyal. I don't think that that was what most fans had in mind when they were picturing what an Ogier looks like. The White Tower itself looks very small, very cramped. It just looks overall low budget. And I think it's pretty sad that such a beloved book series and this series has a rabid fandom. And that's the best they could do? I don't think so. I know that somebody else can come along and do a better job, and I sure hope someone else takes a crack at it. Not even getting into the major deviations from the plot, they got the vibe of the series wrong. The Wheel of Time series was never like Game of Thrones. It's a classic good versus evil. It's fun times going on an adventure. The vibe was lighthearted. It was teasing. It was silly. It was about weird love triangles and love quadrangles. It was kind of a soap opera, more or less. And the treatment Amazon Prime gave it was to make it dour, depressing, make Tom Maryland seem like a depressed cowboy instead of a fun glee man. Things like that. Their attempt to make it dark and gritty, I think, just falls very flat. It fails entirely. I'm all for dark and gritty, but this just missed the mark. And they're working from source material that was never dark and gritty in the first place. So it feels like a fundamental misunderstanding of the vibe and what the entire aim of the series is about. I watched the premiere with 2 other friends who are fans, and we all ended up just being very disappointed, kind of making fun of it, and I haven't had any urge to watch seasons 2 or 3, even though, yes, I've heard they get better in quality, and I'm sure it does get better in quality because that's such a low bar. But I didn't want to do any more wrecking of what I have in my mind. My headcanon is better. And overall, I just could imagine so much better for what this show could have been. The potential that it had was astronomical. I think it could have been a bigger cultural phenomenon than Game of Thrones if it had been handled in the right way. And I think this just kind of goes to show the power of who's in charge of some of these big shows. Like, George R. R. Martin was a TV executive producer. He was involved from the get-go on the Game of Thrones adaptation, and I think that his involvement helped it become a massive cultural phenomenon. In contrast here, the people in charge of Robert Jordan's estate, I'm not sure how much control they had over what was being done or how much input they were allowed to have. I don't know if they knew enough about TV production or so forth. I'm sure there's many factors involved. Again, I hope it is handled by somebody who's a fan in the future that has a strong vision for what it could be, and the potential that it has is just astronomical. So that is my take as a major Wheel of Time fan.